Have you ever wondered why plants have a tendency to wilt if you don't water them? Well, in order to answer that question, we have to take a look at a mechanism that cells use to move materials across the cell membrane. And the name of that mechanism is passive transport. And you can think of this as the easy way of moving materials across the membrane. In order to understand passive transport, let's review some basics about solutions. When you make a solution, there's two main ingredients. There is the solute, which is the molecules that you're dissolving. There's the solvent, which is the liquid that you're mixing the solute into. And when you put those together and mix them evenly, you get the solution. Now in cells, examples of solutes are ions, sugars, and amino acids. And in cells, the solvent is almost always water. Now, different solutions can have different concentrations. For example, if we compare solution A to solution B, we can see that solution B has many more solute particles than solution A does. And so we would say that solution B is more concentrated. So concentration just refers to the amount of solute that is dissolved in a certain amount of solution. And this can often be measured in molarity, which is abbreviated with a capital M. And in this case, whenever you have an area where there's low concentration next to high concentration, we call that a concentration gradient, simply a difference in concentration between two areas. Now here's what that might look like in a cell. In this picture of the cell, here's our lipid bilayer, and we can see that there's a high concentration of solute molecules on one side, and there's no solute molecules on the other side. So we would describe this as a very steep concentration gradient because the difference is very big. In this picture, there are more solute molecules on this side, so this side is more concentrated than this side. So again, we have a concentration gradient, and it's pretty steep. In this situation, though, the amount of solute molecules on this side is the same as the amount of solute molecules on this side. So there is no concentration gradient. Instead, we would say that this is at equilibrium. Now, we can describe the concentration of solutions in a few different ways. Let's take a look at this beaker. This beaker has a solution in it that's 0.8 molarity. The beaker contains a bag that has a solution that's 0.2 molarity. Now you can see that this number is bigger than this number. That means this solution is more concentrated. But let's take a look inside at the microscopic level as to what's going on in those solutions. Here in the beaker, our 0.8 molar solution, we can see that there's 4 solute molecules in a given space, compared to the bag, which only has 1. So whenever one solution is more concentrated than the other, we call that solution hypertonic. And the solution that's less concentrated is known as hypotonic. It's also important to keep in mind the role of water here. A hypotonic solution has little solute, but it's going to have more solvent, more water, and thus a low molarity. The opposite is true for hypertonic. Hypertonic will have more solute, think hyper, lots of, but it's going to have less water. There's one other situation that can occur, and that's when your solutions are at equilibrium, and we call those isotonic solutions. In this case, we've got 0.2 molar solution in the bag and a 0.2 molar solution in the beaker. If we look at it at the microscopic level, we've got 2 solute molecules and 2 solute molecules in the same volume. So these are known as isotonic solutions. So now that we have an understanding of solutions, let's take a look at how that relates to passive transport. Here's the basic idea with passive transport. If you have a concentration gradient, here's our hypertonic side, our high concentration, the molecules are naturally going to move from the highly concentrated area to the less concentrated area until they reach equilibrium. So passive transport is the movement from high to low concentration. And you can also think of this as moving down the concentration gradient from the high concentrated area to the low concentrated area. And there is no energy needed for this process. It happens naturally. There are a few different types of passive transport. The first type is simple diffusion, and this is where you have some solute molecules and they move right through the lipid bilayer from high to low concentration. Then you have what's known as facilitated diffusion. To facilitate means to help. So this is when we have a transport protein helping diffusion along. Again, we've got solute molecules in high concentration here. Maybe these are ions or polar molecules or large molecules. And so they need help getting through the bilayer. So they're going to go through a transport protein. But note, they're still going from high to low concentration. No energy is needed. And then finally, a special type of passive transport is osmosis. This is when it's water molecules that are moving from high to low concentration. And osmosis has a lot of significance for cells. Let's take a look at why. Here we've got a cell membrane, and on one side we've got a hypotonic solution. There's only one solute molecule. And on the other side, we've got a hypertonic solution. There's 3 solute molecules. Now, this solution is not at equilibrium. There's a gradient, so diffusion is going to occur. But the problem is the solute molecule is too big to go through the membrane. In order to balance things out and reach equilibrium, what will happen is that water will move instead. As you can see, water is very tiny. It can fit through there. So equilibrium will be reached by the movement of water from the hypotonic side to the hypertonic side. And this is an important rule to remember. Because a hypotonic solution has more water, relatively speaking, than a hypertonic solution, water is going to move from its high concentration to its low concentration. And one last thing to keep in mind, all of the images we looked at were simplifications because they focused on just one type of molecule. But remember that in a cell, within the cell and outside of the cell, there's lots of different molecules. And so molecules can be moving in different directions at the same time. Here you can see the tan molecule is high concentration on this side. It's hypertonic. So it's going to move over time across in this direction. Meanwhile, the purple molecule is in high concentration on the other side, so it's going to be moving this way from hypertonic to hypotonic over time. And that concludes our introduction to passive transport. In class, we'll take a look specifically at how osmosis affects both plant and animal cells. Please don't forget to do the poll.